My name is Asa Featherstone IV. Come from a long lineage of four Asas. There's three others besides me. I'm here. I've been here in Cincinnati for I want to say probably 8 years now. Spent a lot of my life in Columbus, but I'm here now, and most of my work. I say with my work, I create work that offers alternative perspectives on situations and things that are commonly understood. And so that's primarily through a visual medium, um, from like photography, video. A lot of it is story-based storytelling. So it could show up in documentaries and things of that nature. And I've also been dabbling a little bit into audio formats too and storytelling that way. Um, and a lot of the work that I create is human focused because I feel like the most interesting stories already exist. And it's just talking and working with those people to help tell those truths and things of that nature. And so because of that, I'm inspired a lot just by people, by being around. I think we all have individual stories that really add up to a wonderful human experience. And so if I can use my gifts to help tell that and share that story, then that's what I'm here to do. Primarily for me, growing up, I think what makes this important is that, growing up as a Black individual and a Black artist, you experience certain things that we will discuss later in this conversation. And but a lot of the experiences that I had personally are contrary to the quote unquote black experience that you would necessarily put in a box. And so, but that does not negate the fact that I am a Black person and I do identify with this group. And so a lot of the work that I do is to help others realize that too, that understanding that their experience, even if it doesn't fit into a specific narrative that has been created for them, their truth is just as valuable. And in sharing that, we can help connect with other people.
Thank you so much, Asa. And you're spot on, extending beyond the stereotypes that are expected of a group and really working to highlight your authenticity and in the fullness of your experience. So appreciate you sharing a little bit about both your art as well as your own background. Next up, I want to introduce Mr. Prince Lang. Prince and I had just so much fun. He too is a huge fan of Audre Lorde, as am I. So I kind of fangirled out a little bit, or we fangirled out over one another. But with that in mind, would love to turn it over to you, Prince, to introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Prince. I go by he, him. Uh, yeah, I'm kind of nervous right now, so I'm a freestyle because I had all these notes, and you know what? I'm gonna throw it out. So, yeah, I'm from New Jersey. I lived in New York. Moved out to Cincinnati 2 years ago. I'm an artist, mostly in photography, and I deal mostly with archives and ideas. So that's a lot of what my art is about. I'm also I want to expand my passion. So working with different mediums that I haven't worked with before. I'm really interested in learning. Some of my unique abilities is the love of learning. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Thanks, Prince. Anything that you want to share about your own lived experience and how it shows up in your work? Or do you want to save it for later on in the conversation?
Yeah, that was a hard question to answer because everything influences the art. It's not a specific thing. Me being Black, me coming from a poverty, me, making it to college where a lot of my friends didn't make it to college. Like, I mean, the whole gamut influences my art, and it's hard to have a pinpoint of like exactly what directly influences it. It's like all my experiences inspire and create out of that, and I hope to grow more and make new art and expand my art.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
Next up, Kawita, would you be so kind as to share a little bit about yourself, your name, how you identify, how long you've been an artist, what type of art do you create, what inspires you, what are your muses, as well as how does your lived experience influence your art?
Yes, of course. So, hi everyone, I'm Kavita, and I am a Bangkok-based artist. Although I grew up as a child in Thailand, in Bangkok, Thailand, but I moved and I grew up as a teenager in Australia, and so I've been feeling that in both worlds I've been an outsider or almost an alien, in which I always feel like I don't belong anywhere, both in Thailand and both in Australia, where everywhere that I am, I had to try to fit in or be accepted. After graduating from Melbourne, I came back to Thailand and to work as an artist in Thailand, in which I felt like I had to, grow up as a woman in Thailand, and I felt almost a culture shock because I didn't grow up as a woman in Thailand, and I found that there are so many things that I felt that there are so many expectations of a woman or what a role of woman that is accepted in Thailand, in which I found it very difficult to be. And I think that because I was an outsider when I came back to Thailand, it made me question my identity as a woman. And I think that was when I really started to make work that questions the roles of women, especially in Thailand. And so my work has been about questioning the roles of women and also valuing the roles of women in Thailand, both in, abstract work, like in household, as a role of a mother, and both labor work within different industries around Thailand and also in Asia. And I think, for example, the work that is exhibiting at the Wave Gallery is performing textiles and is focusing on females' labor work in the fashion and textile industry, in which they're being treated and kindly treated as machines, being dehumanized into objects or machines. There are so many protests both in Thailand and all around developing countries, in which the garment workers are protesting for their living wages and to be treated better in the society, but their voices are often muted by the governments and basically the societies, because all of their unkind treatment, all of their work are being hidden within walls, within doors, undergrounds. And so the consumers like us do not see their existence, or although we see their existence, we don't see what's really happening behind the world of capitalism based on materialism, based on consumerism, fast consumption, in which we step over and we, in a way, dehumanize them by not seeing them. And so I think my work is here to highlight their values, their personal, their human values, and for the consumers to see and perhaps shift and change in mindsets, so that we could consume with caution. We could consume with a different mindset, so that the industries would be changed and they would be treated better by the system.
Yeah, I mean, just phenomenal. And the work that you are doing is so needed and so important. To your earlier point around the exploitative practices that fuel the machine, if you will, you giving life to these experiences is a form of validation. You providing the insight around the experiences of others, is definitely something that will hopefully over time shift the stream of consciousness and hopefully inform each of us on how we can make different decisions in our day-to-day lives, and also being inspired to be more active in service, be it an activist or speaking out against issues of injustice. So thank you so much for your work and your contributions. Last but certainly not least, Ha, I would love to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. My name is Hal Zhang. I go by she, her, and I kind of grew up, well, I did grow up in Maryland, but I've lived all over, and I just moved to Cincinnati in June. I teach at the University of Cincinnati, so that's how I came to be here. And I've been calling myself an artist for like the last 10 years. I think that took a while to get there, because there's like a certain connotation that comes with calling oneself an artist, especially in a society that doesn't fully value art. So I make work that is very craft-centric, depending on the idea and what medium best supports it. I work with installation, sculpture, photos, and videos sometimes, and often layering those mediums to create the work. I A lot of my work is based off my lived experiences, because was I was born in China, in a very rural area in China, and then I moved to suburban Maryland, and then came into adulthood in Appalachia. My work is very much informed as a wallflower in a way of almost like just seeing and watching other people, especially as being Asian American, of being like hyper visible yet invisible at the same time. I learned a lot about my expectations of how I'm supposed to assimilate, and so now my work is about that unlearning of assimilation, as well as a critique of whiteness from an outsider standpoint. I'm deeply influenced by artists like Simone Lee, who explores Black female identified subjectivity through what she calls like autoethnographic layers of ideas through the work. And I think that's really powerful, and as a way to like dig into oneself to learn about the society and world in which we live in. I'm also influenced by Octavia Eve Butler, who's a sci-fi writer, who looks at the corrupt nature of humans and their desire for power. I wasn't really spiritual before reading Butler, but after, the way that she talks about like all that you change changes you, and the only lasting truth is change, I really believe that. And then I'm also influenced by other like historians and theorists like Anne and Lynn Chung, who I'm reading right now. She talks a lot about intersections of race, gender, aesthetics, and one of her books, The Melancholy of Race, I'm reading right now. It's really interesting in how like racialized people live in this perpetual form of melancholy, and how that comes about. So I think a lot of my work is helping me to deal with belongingness or a lack of belongingness, while also unpacking why I feel that way through a historical lens of objectification and the denial of personhood that I think white supremacy uses as tools against non-white people in this country, and also promotes like anti-Blackness globally. So I think these are issues in which like we all are invested into. And that's why I'm really excited for this conversation. I respect all of you and your work. So yeah, thank you for moderating, Jennifer.
Like I said, the pleasure is all mine. Each of you are, truly phenomenal in your own right. As you were speaking, a quote came to mind from James Baldwin, and it is, all art is a kind of confession, more or less oblique. All artists, if they are to survive, are forced at least to tell the whole story. And so to your earlier point around how you are constantly unlearning and relearning, I believe that all of us are on some degree of that journey and that path. And so I greatly respect and appreciate your vulnerability and how you are helping each of us in different ways to move along that continuum. So next up, a couple of you have already, done a really great job of kind of providing a bit of an entree into your art that's currently on display. For the audience and individuals that perhaps haven't had an opportunity to visit Wavepool or to see the exhibit or to view the photos online, would love if, you would share a little bit about the art that is currently on display, as well as some of the things that you would like for people that experience that art to walk away with. And I know that could be a bit subjective, but through whatever lens you would view when you were creating it, again, what was that thought? And I open it up.
I'll start just by talking about my work. But the second question, we're gonna have to revisit that one because that one's always tough. I feel like most artists like hate the question, what do you want people to get out of it? It's like I don't know. So we'll have a discussion, but at least I'll tell you about the work and then we can go from there. But my work, as soon as if you haven't had a chance to go to Wavepool to see it, and you do go, or even if you don't get a chance, you walk in and you go to the right, and my work is the first set of portraits that'll be on your right. And it's a selection of, I believe, 5 portraits there from a full collection of 26 portraits, of self-portraits of myself, with quotes and with explanations and written context, talking about instances of everyday racism that had gone on through my life personally. Like I said, it's a small selection that leads into a bigger selection of portraits, and that actual full 26 set of portraits leads into a bigger project that is still in development, but I feel like will always be in development, which I feel like is titled, the title of the work is called Over Time, and it's all under this umbrella. There's a photo component, which is in the show, developing a video component right now, and I'm also recording a podcast component too, where everything is having conversations circulating around the, I like to tag it with like the racism that happens in particularly Black people's lives that doesn't necessarily get televised or glamorized, but still has really, really big, deep-rooted impact. And so the portraits are in the exhibit are, it's just stuff that I don't want to spoil any of it, but a lot of the work, I talk about things that just happen over conversation, or something that or not even conversational things, but behavioral things, like being pulled over for whatever reason, getting followed around my car, stuff like that. And the work is designed kind of to just kind of build conversation, just because a lot of the times when we think about racism and the people that we have, when we talk about fighting for racism and the Black Lives Matter movement, the current movement going on now, we see it's kind of black and white. We see police officers killing Black people, Black men, women, trans, any of them. So that's kind of how we have articulated racism, at least in the recent times, through media. And so when people think of that, they see that most extreme case, not understanding that there are traumatic experiences. And I know we throw around the word trauma a lot, but they are traumatic experiences that build up, and it essentially is designed, this commentary and these experiences are designed to dehumanize you. And so the series is meant exploration of the impact of those small things building up over time, hence the name. And so, yeah, I don't want to spoil too much about the work, but that's just, in general, that's kind of what I'm communicating with those images.
Thank you so much for sharing, Asa. And to your point, those micro instances that have been normalized and oftentimes go unaddressed are what leave folks feeling most vulnerable and questioning, did that really happen? Should I feel this way for what's happened? So I'm sure that folks that experience your art will be deeply moved and impacted, and especially with everything that's currently going on, but also understanding that this isn't new. Right. For some, this may be a moment of awakening, but that within itself is traumatic. And understanding the experiences of oppression and discrimination that, Black, Indigenous, people of color have been experiencing for generations. And to your point, the global sentiments of anti-Black racism and how oftentimes it goes unaddressed and instead kind of blanketed over with terms like diversity, which seeks to oftentimes minimize those individual dimensions in the compounded ways that it impacts the way that we experience life. So thanks so much for sharing, Asa. Next up, who will be the next volunteer?
I can talk a little bit about my work, since I think that's like gaslighting, that could be a transition. So my piece is called the Flesh Machine Quilt. It's when you walk in, go to left, go all the way to the back. It's a hanging quilt made out of these transparent fishnet-like fabrics that are light skin, like nude tones, that has these pockets in for each of the squares. Inside the pockets are porcelain medallions that I have invited viewers to write onto them the shame that they've been carrying around with them. And through the ceramic firing process, I permanentize the shared shame, and then those are placed into the pockets. So there's like a layer of care and making permanent these ephemeral feelings that, might creep up into our everyday behaviors and experiences. So then that's shared in the space, and viewers are allowed to like go and pick them out of the pockets and look at them and kind of feel the weight of it. And so I become really interested in thinking about shame, because it is this tool that colonization has used, like, to gaslight people, especially people into feeling not enough, of not working hard enough, of not being grateful that we have enough, when really there just isn't structurally enough resources given to people to actualize and to become like our fullest infinite potential that we have, because we all do. It's just depending on the circumstances we're born into, the resources that we have. Like, some people are more privileged than others, and I think that like no matter what, we all have a certain kind of shame. It's like this master emotion that is very deep seated into feelings of unworthiness, of not accepting love or belonging to a space, and so it holds us back from venturing out and trying new things, because like I think shame is the way in which we can hold ourselves to comfort, but like when comfort is actually really toxic for us. And it's important to be uncomfortable, to confront and to grow from it. Because then when we allow our shame to fester, it becomes fear of other people, of not knowing people who might not look like us, who has different perspectives than us. And so with the project, I'm hoping to kind of collectively look at shame without the lens of who the person is behind it, but really like we all have a lot of shame in which we often don't work on, because there's other things to do. Like, we have family to take care of, we have ourselves to take care of. But yeah, that's my project.
Wait, what was that? Like, okay, what was that? You said something about comfort. When does comfort become harmful? Is that what the question that you asked?
Yeah.
At what point?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's like sometimes we get so comfortable in how we operate that we don't realize that it's harmful to us, and it becomes like a toxic pattern, which I think is how we get to this point that we are. It's like socially, we're in denial, and so we continue.
What a like, and we can hear the rest of the work too, but what about like what a time to really be asking that question, like in a when we're in a pandemic and when a lot of us are potentially like, you know, working from the comfort of our own home. Like a lot of us, I feel, you know, if we're privileged enough to be in that position, that is, but I feel like a lot of us now haven't asked that question yet, because right now we're seeking comfort because everything has been like all random and unknown. And so I think I want to think about that question a little bit more. It's really interesting.
I totally agree, Asa. That is such an interesting question. And I think that in order to get through to start a process of healing, that acknowledgement first of harm is so important, in trauma and naming it, as well as the grief that so many of us are experiencing right now in light of the pandemic, the loss of life, the loss of a way of life. And so the communal grief that so many of us are carrying. So really great questions that you've posed, Ha, as well as excellent overview of both the work that you currently have on display, but also I think that when you experience an exhibit, you're always left with those questions. So appreciate the deep introspective perspective. Next up, Kawita, it looks like you're unmuted, so I will turn it over to you.
Yes, so I think that to continue from the previous conversation, I think that my work is also about, breaking down the whole system that is making us as individuals not feeling good enough, not being able to be good enough for the society or to be accepted, in which made us all crave to be more, to consume more, to desire more. And it creates this continuous loop of desire, because the industries and the societies are almost pressuring us to be more in terms of their perceptions, or to live up to their perceptions or perspectives of what a person should be, or should be success in the reality of the current modern society. And I think that the work is about breaking down that system, in which, I'm not talking about the individuals or the consumers like us, ourselves, but I'm talking about, the effect from this cause, which, a cause of fast consumption, a cause of this massive consumption, because we desire to be more. In this way, because we desire to consume more, it creates a high demand in terms of, a mass, a huge, fast production. The work that is exhibiting at Wavpool Gallery is from a series called Performing Textiles, which is about a desire to consume more in the current behavior of consumption. It is about the current fast fashion, which is exploiting the human beings, the women workers behind the machines that is producing garment fabrics or garments for the consumers. That we have so many seasons right now that and the clothes are very, very cheap, which means that we can buy new clothes every season without realizing that why the clothes are cheap, or why or why do we feel like we have to consume again, or why do we feel that we have to buy again? Because we have a feeling that if we do not keep up with the trends, if we do not keep up with what looks good, we would not be accepted by the society. And so the workers behind this mass production in fast fashion in the performing textile series are working continuously, repetitively, but sometimes not being paid enough, or all the time not being paid enough, or sometimes forms of slaveries that are not being paid at all in many societies, and becomes forms of slaveries. And I think that we are all busy trying to be accepted, busy behind our own desire to see the truth of exploitation, the truth of unkind treatment towards these women workers behind the continuous loop of consumption for us. And so I think that performing textiles in Webful Gallery, in which I act as the textile machine, the work is the red video. In this one, I am a human being, but is performing as the spinning wheel, spinning the yarn continuously, nonstop. There are two videos, two channels, in which one channel, you will see that there's the large needles underneath the human body that is, spinning the wheel. And this large needle is the key to this machine, in which, turning the cotton into yarn. And I think that I used that danger, the key danger within that machine, underneath the human body. And when that human body is, turning around and around, the body has to hold on tight, and I could fall anywhere. During my 3 weeks of practice in this performance, I without the needles, I fell a lot, fell on the ground a lot. And also I think that there's also a sense of, always being cautious of, falling, and then getting up again. But that when you fall, or, fall out of the system, the body will get hurt because the needles underneath. So yes, I think that, it's all about breaking down the whole pattern of why the industries, or why the society are making people feel that, we always want to be satisfied with ourselves, always want to be accepted, always want to consume more in order to be accepted, because they always feel that we're not enough.
I have nothing to say. Nothing to say. I think we should sit with that for a moment, though. How often we just move on from moments that are vulnerable, moments that are raw, moments that unearth feelings of, be it inadequacy or shortcomings, or whatever, however that may manifest. But I want to take maybe 15 seconds and just allow us all to sit with this. Be it discomfort, thank you so much for sharing that. Last but certainly not least, Prince. And I have to be fully transparent in sharing this. During our pre-work together, Prince sent me a recording of him spitting a few bars on a piece called Lemonade that totally just brought me so much joy and made my day. So Prince, please do share with us a bit about the work that you currently have on display, but then also what's next for you. I mean, you've got work on display, you're dropping bars, you've got this really dope background that you're standing in front of right now. You've got the mic, so I feel like you're just like a Renaissance man. Would love to hear more.
Yeah, there was so much that was said in these last couple minutes that I feel like we should be unpacking those things. But I'm going to take my time to talk about the work. So, like Jennifer was saying, I was reading Audre Lorde. I've been reading her work since high school. She is, for those that don't know, she's a poet, lesbian, warrior, activist. And the work that really inspired my work, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house, right? And that's kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about dismantling a system. How does one do that? What system are we talking about? First, a lot of people don't even see the system. And so my project really was starting there, but then a moment happened. A friend came to my house from the East Coast. He took a dump and clogged my toilet. My whole bathroom was filled with water and poop. He went to Home Depot, got this contraption called a snake. But when he came back with, actually, here, let me get it. He came back with this cotton. It's I don't know if you can see, there we go. This cotton. And I thought that was so interesting. It was a joke on his part. He's a African-American man. And it was a housewarming gift because I had just moved in my apartment. And I thought that was so fascinating. And then I started thinking about like my people's from Georgia. We were slaves. I did some genealogy research. We were slaves. And, and then I started taking pictures of it. And I was like, man. And then I use this phrase, the fabric of our lives. And thinking about, we've been talking about fast fashion, the labor that is so oppressive. I mean, there's whole zones. They make whole new rules for people, and it's a complicated system because, we were talking here about how it's so detrimental to their health, but also at the same time, many people feed their entire family that way. So it's a really complicated system. And so I was like, you know what? I want to go photograph more of these, I want to photograph more objects. And I went to Home Depot and I was there and I was like, I was uninterested, completely uninterested. And so I went home and I was like, I deal with archives a lot. More I deal with 18th and 19th century archives. Deborah Willis is like one of my heroes. But I was like, maybe I should archive all the items in my house. So I began to do this large feat. I got 50 items and I'm like, man, I own a lot of stuff. And I got to about 150 and I kind of ceased and I was like, maybe this can be a volume type work. And I photographed them on a plain background, really clinical. I wanted people to see the object. I began to also play with my body because I began to think about how my body is a tool. That's the tool that I'm given at birth. Like that's the tool that everyone is guaranteed. You're guaranteed a body. It might not be functional, you know, but you're guaranteed a body. And also the labor of holding these objects. But I'm also playing with the idea of, you know, master's house. This is my house. Like I am the master. And then this really complex idea as well is like photography is a tool that the master has used throughout its existence as a medium to oppress Black people. So I'm also thinking about that and playing with that. And really what's required, Andre Lord, she, you know, so I'm Andre Lord, she's asked by NYU to come lecture, right? And she's the only Black woman that's lecture. It's late, you know, and she begins to critique the conference that she's at, and saying to other women that she's speaking to other women. So it's very interesting because I'm a male that's coming into this conversation. And so, you know, in one aspects, I should probably shut up, you know, and just listen, in which I've read and listened. And she's talking to women and saying, there's women that rely so heavily on the system. I remember talking to Hal and just talking about how I also rely on the system, and it's a hard thing to play the game, the system, and there's many systems, right? To play the system to gain power, right? Like what we're talking about is power in changing things. But when you play the system, it's risky because you become a part of the problem. You have to develop new languages. Literally, you have to, like, I probably shouldn't be using photographs at all. You have to make new languages to be able to, and you have to depend on other people that are not relying on the system, right? To really change and dismantle the system, right? We're talking, you know, the prison system. My whole people is prisoned right now. Like currently, right now, my people are enslaved, and we're okay with that. We're okay with that. And so how do we even approach, like for me, how do I even approach dismantling that system? And so my work that is at Wavepool currently are these, it's like these small 2x2 images that I'm causing the viewer to think about how the objects that they own is connected to a history of oppression and slavery. For me, it's a foundation for me to explore different systems. I remember showing this work to a friend named TC, and he's looking at the work and he's being impacted, and there's a photo of a knife. He's like, you know what this reminds me of? African women being in the kitchen making food for slave masters, them holding these huge kitchen knives. He said, do you think they thought about killing their master? And I thought that was so powerful. And so for this work, what's next for this work is begin to use language to deconstruct what I'm actually getting at. Because right now it's very open. A child can come to the work and really engage with it, you know? But also the work is also provocative because I really stretch someone's imagination to think about the objects, like how is this object related to slavery, right? I'm forcing the viewer to consider every object is, right? And I'm not giving them the answer. I'm not spoon feeding them my thoughts. And then also it's overwhelming because there's so many objects. I use kind of, Stephen Shore was a big inspiration on the format at Wavepool. It's kind of like uh, a panorama view where you can walk down this kind of corridor of images, and it's overwhelming. Um, they're also black and white. I'm also taking away some of the lure of color, right? Because color can it has a texture to provide information and make things glamorous, where I'm taking away to really get to the subject of the object. So that's a little bit about it. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing, Prince. I mean, there were so many gems and so many just deep and philosophical spaces that we can go with this conversation that you've introduced for us. So thank you to each of you for being so vulnerable in this conversation and giving so much of yourselves. Prince, to your point around taking away the color, right? An individual's lens is based and shaped by their lived experience. And so how they engage with the various objects on display is deeply driven by their lived experience and their path and their truth. However, to your point around taking away the color, it makes me think a lot about Kawita, your comments just around the way that we dress things up, right? And this constant cycle of wanting more and striving after continue to acquire things. And so, again, thank you to each of you for sharing. And in the interest of time, I do have one last question. Again, there's so many different places that we can go with this conversation, but I honestly don't feel like we'd be able to do any of them justice. So I will end on something that's relevant, right? This is Black History Month. We are in a pandemic. We are in the midst of the civil rights movement of our time. I had the great pleasure of hearing Angela Davis speak at NKU yesterday. And someone asked her, you've been through this, right? You've been through things like this. And she was very transparent in sharing that we are in uncharted territory. And so, to your point, Prince, around the need to recreate, we can't reform, we need to transform. And so, coming into this season with so many things going on, I want to give each of you an opportunity to just take maybe a minute to share some of the specific ways that you've been impacted and what's giving you hope.
I can share. So thinking I I've been pretty privileged, I think, to have secured a job. I have a tenure track position, and I think that's really, I feel really lucky to be able to have housing, healthcare, the ability to work from home. So I'm looking at how, with that power, with my privilege, how I can support other people. And I'm thinking a lot about mutual aid and how that has been a form in which people are supporting each other. Like, people shouldn't have to be doing this though, because the government should be providing for its citizens, not relying on people to provide for people. So I'm thinking, like, how do we translate that after a pandemic too? And I think as artists, we're able to kind of visually create new forms in which we can exist and depend on each other. But then, I don't know, like, how do we push that forward? And I think one of the things we need to dismantle is grind culture, something that works all of us to the bone, to be productive even in a global pandemic. Like, how do we, like, if the government just shut everything down for a month, it would curb the infection rate. People wouldn't have to be going out there. Black and brown people wouldn't be disproportionately dying because, they're in this production culture that doesn't give them protection. So I think there could be many ways in which we can reimagine what our future looks like, but I think we need to first and foremost disrupt what isn't working, what has been toxic to all of us. And I'm really hopeful that we can do that. Yeah, so I've been finding a lot of joy in teaching actually right now, being able to like talk with my students about how they perceive the future and what isn't working for them too, because they are the next generation of change makers as college age students. So that has been really healing for me to kind of scheme with them.
Thank you, Ha.
Yeah, for me, uh, two of my aunts passed away during COVID. And that was really difficult for me. And then not being able to go to their funeral, that was like, that was just hard, But I think what's giving me hope is, yeah, we're in uncharted territories. Like, and I think for especially a lot of the people that I grew up with, that a lot of Black people that I know, what's giving me hope is I feel like there's an awakening, not just to the problem, but to creatively think of the solution. That's what, you talked about Angela Davis. She has a great book about Are Prisons Obsolete? And the crux of that, her argument, if you haven't read it, it's amazing. You need to read it. But the crux of that argument, there's not one answer. There's a multitude of answers that we need to creatively imagine and implicate and create action. A lot of times what I mean, I could keep going, but I feel like a lot of times we get stuck in identifying the problem, which is crucial to understanding or making a solution, right? But sometimes we get stuck there, and I'm really excited about coming together with people and finding solutions. Let's like put some work to it, and like let's do the work. I'm about the action. I'm about, okay, if it's a low income place, don't take the income out of the place. Like, we should be giving them income if it's a low income place, or I know homies that I mentor, that the only way they can get money is selling crack, and I'm like, bro, you got to get a skill. He's like, what skill, Prince? What skill? And I'm like, there's so many. And like the creative solutions, I'm excited and I'm hopeful for the creative solutions that are coming.
Thank you so much for sharing, Prince. And there are so many creative solutions and also ways to apply skills that individuals have regardless of occupation. And I think that shifting the paradigm on how we think about and value skills and lived experience, and instead of us creating spaces that offer those things, instead trying to retrofit them with which we know just doesn't work. Asa.
Yeah. Prince, yeah, a lot of that stuff you're saying resonated with me, and I want to piggyback on a couple of the things you said. Often a quote that, I don't know the quote verbatim, but I know that Maya Angelou, she often talked about the idea of thriving rather than surviving. And our people have and still are in a state of survival all the time. And I think, to Prince's point, we are entering a space where we're having conversations about what thriving looks like and what it looks like to take lead rather than trying to fit ourselves into the current system that exists, and how to be that, but how to move on and make our own system and be like, yo, we're running this circle here. Y'all can come on or whatever, but we're running this joint. So I think it gives me hope because, now with my peers and with other people, we're talking about, and even this even goes into your grind culture that you're talking about, like I think we're turning a corner where we're thinking less about, how do we continue to work and get this bag or whatever so that we can see it to next week. But instead of doing that, we're like, okay, look, there's some land over there where we can start our own thing. What do I need to do to get to that stage? So now I run the show, and that I don't have to listen to whatever the system put in place for me. Go ahead and keep that over there. We're running this thing over here. So I think I've been hearing and seeing that. And I think the emergence in that's one of the benefits to having this time during this pandemic is that we got to slow down and we get to actually think. Of course, we're all in a survival state because we don't know what's coming up next, but that's also the beauty. Since we don't know what's ahead, we can make that future. And so I think I'm hopeful that we can do that.
Thank you, Asa. I want to thank everyone for tuning in this evening. I will not be the last voice that you hear. It will be one of the artists. So I wanted to be intentional in appreciating each of you for giving of your evening, to each of our artists for giving of themselves so freely, and for hopefully this conversation to continue. This is not a period, but a comma for us to continue to write this story. Each of us will determine the future and the actions that we take in these moments, the ways that we channel the inspirations that we are receiving will ultimately, as Asa so eloquently put it, become the future that we will all create for better tomorrows. And so with that, Kawita, I will turn it over to you to close us out.
So I think from where I am coming from a developing country like mine, the pandemic is truly a wake-up call for a rush in transformation in the way that we live. I think that the pandemic for a country like mine has highlighted and has made what I've been saying in my work so obvious, that the inequity and the inequality in the Thai society has been very, very massive, has been a huge problem. The pandemic has made us see that, in Thailand, where people like me or people in the middle class can work in their homes, in their comfort, away from the pandemic, away from the illness and the risk of death. There are people like laborers and workers in Thailand that cannot do that because they have to survive day by day. They have to go out and work, even though, some of the factories are closed, but the people in the front line, people who are cleaning the streets, for example, or working in some industries that cannot be closed because otherwise, our economic or whole perceptions of economic system will collapse because we are basically not a rich country at all, in fact, poor. And so I think that it has highlighted that, if we continue to live in this way, if we continue to consume in this way, we will exploit these people that are dying day by day because they have no secure system, no security in order to stay home, but they have to work. I think that the pandemic has also made us all realize, for example, in environmental issues, that it has made many organizations thinking of the way that we would not exploit the environments in Thailand or the world, and how can we save the environments from falling down, from collapsing, or from going into the woods and to the forest and invade it. Which may be the cause of the pandemic itself. And so I think that with the new works that I've been working with different organizations is also about trying to working towards that. How can we protect the human beings as well as the environment, so that if everyone work together, it can be a solution to live with the nature, to learn to live with the nature. We are the only species, I think, that do not speak, do not converse with the natures. and this, in this case, it has led us to this point in which we have, exploited them so much, we have invaded them so much, so they are returning their price by giving us a lesson that if we do not learn to live with the nature, if you not learn to understand, really speak to the nature, then this is what we would face: the pandemic, the death of the population, of the people.
Thank you all so much. This has really been powerful. This is Cal again from Wavepool. We are past time, and I wanted to just say that the exhibition is up for another week and a half until February 27th. So please stop by and see it. We're open Wednesday through Saturday, 12 to 5. And there's also a video tour of each of the works on the website. There is a question, which I don't think we have time to answer, but I do want to put it out there, and maybe we can end on a question because it's a pretty good one, from Madavi Hayden. They say, just in case, all of the works in Exposing the Limits seem to me to express critiques of capitalism and other larger systems of oppression through intimate insights into the lived experiences of each artist. And many of the authors, artists' inspirations mentioned by Ha, Kawita, Asa, and Prince can easily be linked to anti-capitalist sentiment. This was incredible and inspiring to see at this exhibit, and thank you so much for sharing each of yourselves through your art in this way. My questions to each artist are: how do you balance and or negotiate critiques of large systems of oppression like capitalism with your desires for personal artistic expression? Do you feel that you have to make decisions between art that you should be creating to fight global systems of oppression and art that you want to be creating for your own personal desires? If one of you feels up to answering that, we can end on that. But otherwise, I don't know. Let me give you a moment to do any. Prince, Ha, Asa, does anyone want to tackle Kawita?
I think that, so to answer that question, the question is, how do I balance with, working with fighting the global system and my personal desire? Is that correct? So I think that, can anyone hear me correctly?
Yes. Hello? Yeah, you've done great. Thank you, Kawita.
Okay. So I think for me, my desire and my passion to create art in the first place itself has nothing about my personal desire, because my personal desire is actually, well, by living in the society that I live in right now, I think my passion is to change and also be a part of the change in the society, in the system. I think I'm not saying that, the capitalism, the ideology of capitalism is a bad system, but the current modern capitalism, which is a bad capitalism system, is the one that is a problem, and it needs to be fixed and needs to be changed. I think I have seen a documentary on Netflix, and it is called, you might know, it's called Saving Capitalism. So it is about saving the system. It is about finding a solution, finding a ways to fix the system so that the system would have more equality, would have more equity, what is a solution to a good economic system? Is a good economic system about the power of money, about the profit, or is it about a sustainable economic system, which is sustainable, which is spreaded, which is spreaded means, everybody gets the benefits. And if it's yes, sustainable and spread it. If that is the case, and if that is ethical enough, humane enough, sustainable enough, environmental friendly enough, then that, what is that solution? What is going to be a pathway towards that ideology of capitalism? And I think that, that is my journey. That is my, I've been working for 10 years now, but I think that it's, in my work, I've always been answering the same question. If I find the answer, I would find more. It's a nonstop thesis for me. I think it's a nonstop research into finding a solution to a better world, a better system, a better society. And I think that making art is not just about, creating what you want to say, but also you developing yourself, developing your thoughts to within, while making that, thinking through making, finding new answers, finding new ways in order to fix the society through art, and also, having art as a voice to speak about these questions with the society, so that everyone could work together. So I think that my answer is, my art is finding that way to change. And the problems has always, some small problems has always changed. So the art has also followed that in order, to speak about the current problems, the current issues, and trying to change that.
This has been a wonderful evening. Kawita, thank you for closing us out on such a inspiringly high note, all things considering. I think that the question that you continue to ask yourself is probably the question that many of us will continue to ponder moving forward. And so gratitude and appreciation to each of you, as well as to all of the attendees this evening. I hope that you have a great night and take good care.